Hello, everybody. Welcome to Pharmaceutical Soccer. I am happy to be here, relaxed after a long weekend. I hope everybody else had a great weekend as well. Of course, I'm here with Valer Shabilla and Clay Trainum. We're here to talk Nashville soccer every week, just like we always are. Even though we may not want to talk about Nashville soccer, we're still going to be here no matter what to talk about it with you. Valer, before I get to you when it comes to your weekend, I feel like us as podcast partners need to just have a sit down and just conversation with our boy Clay Trainum here. Clay, it's been how is everything okay over there in the Clay Trainum household when it comes to just are sports good for you? What's going on over there?
Hoosiers won. So that doesn't happen every weekend. MTSU won. That doesn't happen every weekend. I don't know what else you're talking about.
I like how this positive spin. This is exactly what we keep Clay around for. The positive spins.
It was
So
really
obviously the Everton game was one of the worst endings to an Everton game I've ever seen.
Oh,
But I've seen it before, and I've seen it lose in that exact fashion 5-2, giving up 5 goals in the last like 10, 15 minutes before. So, you know, similar to the way that you have to look at NSC right now. They had the best 85 minutes that they've had in like 2 years. And I'm just on that, other than the last like seven.
I watched that Everton game on the plane actually on the way here to San Diego. And it was, I mean, it kept me up because I was sleepy and I was like, oh, the last few minutes, this is fun.
Fun, yeah. It,
For you, not, but yeah.
I mean, it's really something people don't normally text me after Everton loses. It was like a dominating thing. I got so many texts. Tony Husband sent his condolences to me like, after that game. I mean, it was terrible. It was a
What, the third week of the league? Like, you're not, I mean, there's still plenty
but
of time to make
that
it
is
up.
the blessing. Go
to
ahead,
be
Clay.
to be clear, I'm not actually that worried about them. I think that they're fine. They suck at the start of the season every single year, and they were in a worse spot last year. And if it weren't for the deductions, they would have been 20 points clear of the drop. So I'm not really like long term worried. But man, they're hard to watch sometimes.
Well, that is the blessing and the curse about Clay's optimism that probably comes into play is like if you're cynical like me, you're not getting a ton of text about your team sucking because everybody already knows that you think that. But for Clay, on the other hand, his overwhelming optimism, he's going to get a lot of like, oof, sorry about that. Like,
You okay,
how
my
how you
friend?
feeling over there? I hope that overwhelming optimism is not gone.
And the worst part of it was is so that happens in the morning, right? And then I go to MTSU because MTSU is having their opener with Derek Mason, and there's like a 4 hour weather delay. MTSU goes up 21-0 on Tennessee Tech, a team they're better than. It's gotten quite late. I go home, and as I like lay down in bed, I pull up the end of the MTSU game, and oh no, they're down 25-24 with 40 seconds left. Fortunately, they were able to pull out the end, but I'm like, what a start and end to the day this is.
Well, I'm glad that your weekend at least had some positives. Not as good as Valaire's weekend though. Valaire probably had, I don't know, more fun weekend out of all of us.
I went to Evansville, so that's not
What are you saying about that? Is that a good thing or bad? I can't really figure it out.
obviously Evansville's the greatest city on earth, and I
Right,
went
right, right.
to watch the University of Evansville celebrate 50 years of men's soccer, which was a blast. And so I did have
Uh,
that.
I was in California for this whole weekend, and still I'm leaving today, which is Tuesday, and in San Diego, got to see family members that I don't usually see. Got to celebrate a wedding for a cousin who we grew up together. So like we were together in Iraq and Lebanon, and so like a childhood friend really. So pretty fun. I sound a little tired because I am. It's been go 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 since the moment I landed. Amazing food, amazing people, a lot of dancing. My shoulders really hurt, and you know this is life, man. This is a good time. It's a good time right now. I don't spend a lot of time in California. This is only my second time here. But every time I come back, I'm like, man, it'd be really nice to have weather like this. Like really, really nice to have weather like this in Nashville.
This is absolutely foreshadowing to the when Valera gets a position with the San Diego MLS team in some way, shape, or
Uh,
form.
oh,
I'm
you're
gonna
doing the
I'm gonna
same thing you
come
did.
I'm gonna come back to this episode.
Yeah, y'all. Every time I visit a place, you're always like, "Oh, are you going to St. Louis now for good?" And it's like, no, I just like it. Like I don't know. Like I don't know. It's fine.
I had the opposite weekend probably of Valere, where I was trying to I've been trying to save money because Washington DC is expensive. So by saving money, I decide to just spend a little bit of money to save money. And I
Right,
decided
right, right.
absolutely. So I decided to buy the new World of Warcraft expansion, and that is what I did the entire weekend. And don't go out when you do that, so you save money.
I just want to put it like just to reiterate that Valair just positively compared San Diego and St. Louis, and I don't think that that's ever happened in human history, and I don't think that we should gloss over it. I just want that to be reiterated that that's something that just
I
the show.
I want to say I was comparing them to how Steven reacts to me going to them. I wasn't comparing the actual cities.
Okay,
One of those is a lot nicer than the other. I'll leave it at that.
okay. Just wanted to be clear here. We're doing anything but talk about NSC for obvious reasons.
I was gonna say, which out of did any of us watch the Nashville SC game or
Yes, of course. I cover the team, Steven. This is quite literally my somewhat job.
yeah,
Somewhat.
I do understand that, but like
Yeah.
we were literally
I did
talking
I
about
missed the
before the show.
first
Go
I
ahead.
missed the first like period of the game, and I missed the first goal that was scored and went back and watched it afterwards during the halftime break. But then as soon as I turned it on, they scored the second one, and I watched the rest of it, unfortunately, I guess for me. Um yeah, I was in the hotel room and the TV just wasn't cooperating, so I had to pull it up on my laptop, which meant I had to tweet from my phone, which I don't like doing that. So anyway, that was just a little problem I had.
I watched quite intently during the MTSU weather delay until the second goal went in, and then I was just sort of casually watching, checking in,
Well, I
which
got
is the optimal way to watch NSC right now. You don't want to be locked into it because it'll just frustrate you
well,
to
I
know.
as the night started, I like started getting a little bit sad. Like I just had a night in where like I had game on my left monitor. I decided to have Michigan and Fresno State on my right monitor and Nashville SC on my phone because does Nashville SC deserve my right monitor space instead of Michigan football? I no.
Wow.
I
Relegated in Stevens screen time.
yeah, absolutely. Like what like I don't know. We were talking about it before this episode of how do we continue to talk about this team the same way because we have to say the same things over and over again. And I mean, I could only imagine what job BJ Callahan has to do to try and just change the perspective because it doesn't necessarily seem like a tactics thing anymore. It doesn't necessarily seem like if you change this or this small thing, that'll be better. A lot of it just seems like the outlook of the team and just the way the mentality is in the team. And he has a big job just to change that.
Yeah, we came here on this show like I want to say before Gary Smith was let go, and we looked at each other and we all said, "Yep, this is the lowest point the team has been." And then they let go of Gary Smith, and then a month or two later, we came in here and said, "No, no, no. Actually, this is the lowest point the team has been in." And now here we are, and I think this is the lowest the point the team has been in. Just since the inception of the team, Nashville SC, while it wasn't always an elite team, they have been good, or at least good enough, right? And I think one thing Gary Smith talked about on his last ever question, which I asked, by the way, was Nashville fans reacting or the supporters understanding that it's not always going to be that way and understanding that Nashville SC is not always going to be in the playoffs and fighting to host. Sometimes Nashville SC is going to not make the playoffs. And he did say, credit to him, whether or not he's there, they're still relevant. but this is what we experience. The Geodis Park is having less and less folks go to it. The games have really sad feelings to them, and honestly, not even in person. When even online, I mean, the interactions I'm getting with my National SC coverage is way, way lower than usual. And that, I mean, people are, I mean, even you, Steven, like you're such a big NSC fan and you had it on your phone, right? And I mean, like all these things matter. Like all these things are happening for a reason. And that reason is less wins and more losses. And
Right.
I don't want to make it as simple
No,
as
like
that, but I mean, like it is like
even
that.
being part of being part of the roadie Slack, it was just like there was a few conversations about it, but literally nothing literally nobody posted anything or any sort of discussion in the second half about what was going on in the game. And yeah, you're right. I am a huge NSC fan and I love this team. And it's been I always kind of looked at like teams like Cincinnati when they were going through bad streaks of like how can you still how like can't you not support your team even when you're bad. I still have support for my team, but it's just it's almost like I'm empathetic with the team itself. Like I feel like I'm just sharing the same outlook and vitriol that the team has, and I don't know how you change it.
So, I know that this is going to be a weird, coming from a weird spot, but I think that folks will identify with it. So, I was, of course, raised Catholic. Blair was.
Right.
I'm not sure about you, Stephen, but you
Catholic light. I was Lutheran.
point in your life where you go out of duty more than anything else. It's Sunday. I got to go because that's what we do. And that is the way that going to the last NFC home game felt. Like, oh, it's out of duty. I'm not necessarily sure it's going to be a good time. and and
I,
honestly, it feels like that a little bit. Now, what I will say is that you get there and you're in the game and you're in the atmosphere and it takes over and you remember why you like it, but like it is one of those things where it's like, yeah, I guess we're going to a game. Hopefully, it won't be depressing, but much like going to church, sometimes it ends up depressing anyway. So,
I was wondering where you were going with that when you first started, and
Yeah.
now it actually makes a lot more.
They had us in the first half, not gonna lie.
Yeah,
They had us in the first
they
half.
had us in the first half.
No, but
sometimes, like, it doesn't. Even when things were bad last year, right? Like, you still knew Hani was going to be Hani. Like, you were going. There are things that you could depend on. That like it's like you when you enjoy a 1-0 win, like it's like that you can like you're going to get a decent defensive performance. You're going to get a couple nice plays from Hani Mukhtar, and I think you're still getting a here and there the Hani part, even if the goals haven't been with it. But like it is like you don't know what you can expect, but you can't really expect anything good on the basis of what's been the last 3 months, 2.5 months.
and I think I'm not here to tell anybody like I told you so or anything along those lines. But when we talked about letting go of a manager like Gary Smith, who was here for a very long time, and we said that there's going to be a very tough transition period where folks came up to me all the time and said, no, 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 just let go of the manager. Everything's going to be solved, which is a stand that people told me often, often, every week almost. I think this is more so like what happens generally when you let go of a manager who's been the only manager to have this team. And not only that, a manager who has been able to provide results. And yes, yes, I know Nashville SC didn't win a cup. However, Nashville SC was not bad at any point during Gary Smith's reign.
The thing that I think, because we talked about it on this show a little bit, you can have a team that rebounds with a new manager in the middle of the season. Like I think we referenced Cincy as an example of that, like a team that got better quickly with a new manager and a new GM. And I think the key difference there, and you just mentioned it, is that Cincy, when they made these changes, did so as a team that made frequent changes. Like they knew
Yeah.
how to weather the sort of changing landscape of the team and the roster and the back offices and things like that, because they did it several times. Gary Smith in this case has been the only guy since before the USL team. So like it goes back a long time, and that's a huge culture change. You already had a little bit of a culture change, a guy like Dax leaving, things like that. Those are he's maybe not on the field like as big a player as he was at the start of his NSC career, but that is a big, massive cultural change, losing one of the all-time great MLS midfielders, and then you add in the long-time only manager change on top of it, and you've just got a massive amounts of change in the roster and in the coaches' offices.
Yeah, it just seems very discombobulated right now, unfortunately. And I'm sure there's going to be a little bit more we can talk about as more questions, of course, are being asked as we continue to go along, especially in this losing streak that NSC currently has. And we'll get to those. We're going to talk about the game in some way next, as well as there is a fun friendly coming up, and we'll talk about that and some other MLS news I'm sure we have to talk about as well. And we're going to do that all next right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer. And we are back right here on Pharmaceutical Soccer, of course, at Pharma Soccer on our Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And we have a Patreon. $5 a month does help the show out. It helps us keep doing this. We love doing this, even when Nashville is in the position that they are at. So we would love to have you join, be a part of that. Again, it's only $5 a month. Patreon.com/pharmasoccer and our website at pharmasoccer.com. So check that out as well. Normally, during this segment, this is a time where we are going to talk about the game in specifics. We're kind of in a different state with that because you could literally just go listen to the last episode from last week and probably get the same, type of overall feeling. Good chances, horrible mistakes outshine all the good chances and all the good things that did happen. So did I sum up that game correctly?
Yeah.
Cool.
We haven't scored the last time Nashville scored what the number of goals it would have taken to win that game. Nobody had ever heard "Not Like Us" by Kendrick Lamar. It was May 4th. May 4th was the last time Nashville had scored more than 2 goals in a game.
Now the last time Nashville have scored once in their last 6 games in total, and that was against New England in the Leagues Cup. And yeah, out of the 10 games, they lost 9 of them and drew the one, and the one they scored 1 goal in. So, do you want more stats, or are we good to move?
No, we're good to move on.
Okay, fair enough.
Same players performed decently. The other players that we continue to talk about poorly and all that. It's the same stuff. Like it's hard. So I think there's a couple different things that we do want to bring up. Let's start with the Patrick Yazbek situation. I think that's a good place to start. Valera, do you kind of want to go into just kind of the MLS ruling with that and how that all came to be?
Yeah, so MLS on Thursday last week announced the suspension of Patrick Yazbek for 2 games for violating the discrimination policy in MLS. We don't know exactly what he said or what was said on the pitch, like we said, but there were some reports, I would say credible reports, out in Australia that it wasn't what folks speculated to be. That said, we still don't know what he said or what was said on the pitch, and we probably will never hear of this again. He already served one of his games. Obviously, that was the Orlando match. His second game will be the Atlanta match. After that, he'll be ready for selection again. One of the things that the MLS folks mentioned was that any sort of help from Patrick's side, any sort of whether he admitted to fault or being agreeable and working on training and getting better, those sort of acts do factor in their decision. And I do believe that whatever he said was maybe the right thing in terms of what he said to them, and I think he is working on getting better on whatever happened. He will be going through some sensitivity training as well. So agreeing to all of that and being cooperate. What's the word?
Cooperative.
Cooperative. Thank you. English. Tough time.
It's I'm never the one to be able to drop the word that should be used in that scenario, so I appreciate this moment.
But you did it. You did it. Yeah, being cooperative helped, I think, minimize the suspension a little bit. At least, a game or two was taken out. So all in all, I think what BJ said is the team is going to try to get better from this, and I think Patrick personally would be looking to get better and not put himself in these situations going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's crazy watching a story get on all of the big aggregators saying what it was, and it actually wasn't that. I think it's been all but confirmed that it wasn't the word that everyone on Twitter seems to think it was, which is what we were talking about on this show last week. What I will say is that Football Australia, a spokesperson for Football Australia, which is their confederation, said that it wasn't something racist. And I think you can kind of read in between the lines on what it may have been. I don't think that we'll never know what it was, but essentially, Football Australia says it wasn't something racist. A well-regarded reporter in Australia said that it was a deserving suspension, and it wasn't the word everyone says it was. So you can kind of read in between the lines if you need to there, but just know that like these people that are claiming that it's this and it's like against Australians to ban for that word, that's not the word it was. There's been no credible reports that it was that word. So please stop spreading that because it honestly does a disservice to everyone involved. It does a disservice to Yazbek. It does a disservice to the league. It does a disservice to us as a fan base. Like we all want NSC to do well, and kind of going back and caping up for this story as a fan base, which we aren't doing, but it is representative of the fan base, what people have done. That just covers up something that should be punishable, and that a player should be punished for doing. So I think this sort of puts the story to bed on this particular, like, it's done, it's moved on. But I am just very frustrated that I still see NSC fans carrying on with a story that has never been true and never been verified or even close to having any sort of factual backing.
Right. And it's just to kind of switch gears a little bit. I did have a question to pose for the both of you, because now with this 3-0 loss, I felt like I saw a lot more buzz online, just everything in regards to Mike Jacobs, because I think there is a lot to talk about with this team currently being in last place in the East, yet we're the fourth highest spenders in the league, about where our money was spent, what players that we brought in, about the entire structure itself. We talked about this with, Gary Smith, Ian Ayre, and Mike Jacobs working in tandem specifically. So I do have a question specifically for you guys, and you can go as deep as you want to with it. If Nashville doesn't make the playoffs, which it's starting to seem like it's getting less and less likely, do you think Mike Jacobs will be on the chopping block from the FO perspective?
I don't think he will. I do think that it's a question that's worthy of asking. The reason I don't think he will is he clearly was involved in hiring the manager. Like all the reports were that he was involved, and he fits the profile of guys that Mike is interested in. The Huntsville manager hire is somebody that he worked with at SKC. So clearly they would be changing the path that they're charting forward if they were to remove the general manager. That being said, I think that this season has been indicative of problems that have been around all the entire time. I think that Jacobs did an unbelievable job in building a roster that could compete on day one. He built it around veterans. He built it around previous MLS success, and he hit a home run on getting Hani Mukhtar in as a DP. But even going back to that year, even going back to 2018, or not 2018, sorry, 2019, building the roster for 2020, there were a number of misses involved. And no GM's going to hit 100%. That's totally fair. But there were some big money misses, a Miguel Nazarit, a Rodrigo Pinheiro. These guys cost a good bit of money, and they didn't come off. And so you're now at a point where you've built this veteran roster, you built this veteran core. They kind of reached their top level, stagnated, and now you're having a problem replacing them because they're not they're on the other end. Like some of those guys have left now, but these players were on the other ends of their career. They weren't never going to be a top level person for 3 or 4 years. They have a small window of being, in that higher upper echelon MLS player. And so what we're seeing now is a team that didn't really have a clear transition plan in terms of like getting the new guys in and bleeding them out, and then like them being the new veteran core, down the line, because it's been a very mixed bag outside of these domestic signings.
And I would agree. I don't think he will be. I don't think his job will be looked at this next season. I think he will stay in with Nashville SC just based on what we hear from John Ingram and Ian Ayre. As little as we hear from them, they seem on the same page as Mike Jacobs and BJ and everybody else. That organization seems to be working together. One thing I'll say is that I think if they wanted to look at the results and if they said, hey, we're not getting what we need from you, I don't think anybody would say that's an unfair move. And we talked about Gary Smith being in the same situation right before he was let go. I think when you look at what Nashville SC has been able to produce with far less, and then all of a sudden spending more and being able to not being able to produce the same level or higher, I think those questions should be asked by the owner or the CEO or whoever it is, to be like, well, we added more money, we got the coaching hire that you wanted, we want to see the results, and I think that's a completely fair stance to take as well.
I think I was going to compare it to the end of last season with Gary Smith. Actually, like I think you set that up exactly right. Like I think that, much like I said on this show at the end of last season, it makes sense for him to go, but like, and that's a defensible thing, is like he could leave and it'd be a very defensible decision. I personally feel like Mike, even with some of the misses over the years, has earned the right to try and fix it. Like MLS is a league that turns over very quickly. Like you can go from good to bad and bad to good very quick. And I think that Mike has shown that he can build a successful good team in MLS over a number of years, despite long odds from a lot of prognosticators. So me personally, I think he's earned the right to try and figure it out in the same way that I felt like Gary Smith had earned the right at the end of last season, and he didn't. So they moved on. And so I think that Mike's probably in the same boat.
The last thing I'll say about that is that also Mike Jacobs did not hire Gary Smith. BJ Callahan is the first coach Mike Jacobs has hired. So, I talked about the other side, and now I'm going to give you the Mike Jacobs side of saying, hey, I brought players to Gary Smith, and he wasn't able to get the best out of them. I brought, good players, and they ended up leaving the team because Gary Smith wasn't getting the best out of them. And I'm not sure this is happening. I'm just saying this is an argument he can make. Hey, I brought you all these players, you didn't play them. That's also on Gary Smith, not just on Mike Jacobs, right? Because Mike Jacobs can bring all the players he wants. If they don't get playing time, they don't get playing time. To where now with BJ Callahan, this is his guy. They work together. And maybe there's an argument to be made there of like, well, he's the first coach I've hired. Give me at least one season with him. And I think that is also fair from his end.
Yeah, I definitely, though, of course, as the team is going through this spot, you're going to see a lot more misses than hits when it comes to this. I mean, even just this roster specifically. You look at players like Sean Davis on a crazy contract at the current moment who can barely crack the starting lineup. It's going to be interesting to see how Mike Jacobs manages this roster in the next season, because of the fact that a lot of eggs were put in this basket. A lot of eggs were put in the way that Nashville was that this team's roster was successful. We talked about this. That's part of the reason why Gary Smith was the first one to be let go, is because of the fact that there was belief in this roster could do it. Let's bring in a coach that could be successful with this roster. And it's showing that it's not as it seems. So I'm kind of with the both of you. And it's just like, I do believe it is a possibility he can fix this. And I do believe he probably has the right to do it. It's just going to be under a lot more scrutiny. And I really hope he can handle the pressure, of doing that for sure. and
And
I'm excited to
he
see what happens.
doesn't. Yeah, he doesn't face the media every week like Gary Smith does, right? So
Yep.
the scrutiny is not directed at him as much. Let's just say that.
And we're going to switch gears again because I know that, again, we did not want to talk about this game in its entirety of the way it was. Clay, you had a question, I believe, that you wanted to pose to us as well.
Well, I don't know if it was for me, but we were just talking
Was it
about
Valaire?
yeah, but
Fine.
it's related to the point. Like we talked a few weeks ago about like what Nashville 2.0 looks like, and I think we all like sat on the show and we're just like, well, the DPs aren't really that big of an issue. Like Hani Mukhtar's not having a good season. Sam Surge is having an okay season. And we have barely seen Zimmerman, it feels like. But those feel like pieces that you're going to be fine with next year as well. So who is it on this roster as we go into Nashville SC 2.0 that you think you can build around that isn't a DP? Like that are pieces that you absolutely need to see back on the team next year.
I think, I think he will be back on the team. It's confirmed, obviously. But for me, Patrick Yazbek, I think that's a player. You bring in a young midfielder like that, you have to cater to him in midfield. He is a U22 initiative player. You gotta get maybe a deeper number six who can sit there and allow Patrick Yazbek to be that guy, to be that eight hybrid six type of thing that he needs to be. And maybe I'm putting too much on Yazbek's shoulders, but let's be honest. From the moment he was signed, he started every single game, and until the suspension, that's the only time we didn't see him in the team. So it's not me doing that. It's BJ Callahan's Nashville SC putting all that responsibility on his shoulders. And I think for them to trust him this much means that they will be looking to build around him, especially in that midfield area.
Well, and honestly, Nashville SC's midfield, even from the beginning, has often felt like an island of misfit toys. It's like this guy can do this and this, but not this.
Yeah.
This guy can do all of this, but he's slow. Like this guy can break up tackles, but he can't pat. Like it is all of these different pieces. And Yazbek, I mean, given very small sample size, but like has shown that he can do a lot. Like he went in for a hard nosed tackle against Austin. He's played great through balls and things like that in games. Like he's a guy that you think can bring a lot to the fold. And so yeah, I agree on him absolutely. I do think that another one to think about because he's costing a good bit of money because he's a U.S. international. You got to figure out how to use Shaq more effectively. And I don't know that NSC has found a way to. He's done his bits and pieces here defensively. The crossing should be good, but we don't quite see it being used effectively as often as we'd like. I think that he's shown that he can be a very good player in MLS, and you're paying him to be a good player in MLS. So I would like to figure out if there's something that you can do there and build around him a little bit more, because there are times when you think it's setting up great. Like you've got him on the right side, and it should be he should be a more effective MLS player as a national teamer.
I think for me, if he does decide to stay, I think he can continue to be an absolute star for Nashville SC, and I think you could build a team around him as well. That'd be Jacob Schaffelberg, in my opinion. He is a player that we saw. He's probably one of the exciting players that I think we've seen in a national, just specific excitement wise in a Nashville SC kit, where the pace, the way that he is able to directly attack people, and the way that he can play. I think there's a lot there's a lot that Jacob Schaffelberg can do, and if he does decide to stay in Nashville, he can be a star here, I believe. But the team has got to do a little bit better to just build around him, to make sure he has that prowess. I think even Shaq Moore on the right side, like being able to deliver the ball, like crossing a little bit better into Schaffelberg, could be extremely helpful. But to me, non-DP player, easily Jacob Schaffelberg for me, because he also helps the crowd out a lot. That's that's the type of excitement Jacob Schaffelberg brings, and that's something that Nashville doesn't have a ton of and need to continue to try to, press on.
Yep. No, I agree. And I think having Perez and maybe Tyler Boyd even next season on the opposite end will actually help with Schaffelberg because not everything has to go through his side. So having a little bit more balance between the two would be really helpful, including Shaq Moore, of course, on the right end.
A couple of other things to touch on before we just kind of close out of here. Huntsville and Nashville SC do play a friendly, the Space Cowboy Derby, as they have named it. I do appreciate Huntsville giving the ability to vote out names for it. It's a lot of fun. But there is a friendly tomorrow between Nashville and Huntsville. No streaming, so only if you're going to the game you get to watch that. Is that correct in that? No streaming ability?
Yes. I believe so.
Yeah. So unfortunate. It'd be a lot of fun to watch. I'm sure it'd be a lot of fun to see some of those players on Huntsville, play up against MLS opposition, to see Woobin Spacius play Nashville actual competition. That I'm sure would be great. But I'm sure this is great for Nashville SC as well. Just to get another match together under their belt under the BJ Callahan, era. I'm sure there's got to be a lot in trying to figure that out. So, yeah, good for them.
Win.
I'm sorry.
A long time chance to get a win. They haven't had one of those in a long time.
Chance to score a goal. Scoring a goal would be nice as well. There's a lot of things to think about in that perspective. Before we go, we'll do plugs here and stuff soon. Well, we could do this with plugs. Nashville, we're currently in the latter half of the season. There's only 7 more matches to go in the MLS season. Kind of how I want to end this is by getting a point prediction on how many points you think Nashville will get in this last 7 that they play. So let's start with Clay. Why don't you give your plugs and your prediction for how many points that Nashville can get?
Yeah, so just heads up, the last 7 are at Atlanta, Chicago, Cincy, at New England, DC, at New York City, and at Chicago. So not exactly a murderer's row to end the season for Nashville SC. You can follow me at Clay LaSoul on Instagram or Twitter. Check out the Nashville Soccer Archive. If you have anything you'd like to donate to the Nashville Soccer Archive, please reach out to me. And for the number of points, I'm going to go with just a nice even number. I'm going 10. I'm going to be very optimistic here. All these other teams suck too. So I'm going to go 10 points. 3 wins and a draw.
Valer.
Yeah, follow me at Valer Shabello on Twitter, Instagram, or Threads. I am on all 3 of those, pretty active. Also subscribe to my YouTube channel, which I'm less active in. Do it anyway. I'm gonna go with 8 points, 2 wins, 2 draws, and 3 losses. I think the 2 wins will come both over Chicago, because they play twice. And I think the 2 draws will be somewhere between Atlanta, New England, and DC. I just don't know which 2. And then the rest will be losses. And I think that's even an optimistic view. So when I heard Clay say 10, I was like, wow, this is and I also want to predict that Nashville SC will not win the wooden spoon, even though that would be a trophy in the case, unfortunately.
It doesn't matter if I don't think we will. I don't think San Jose is going to be good. God, I really hope not. At PH Steven HG on whatever. Follow Valer and Clay though. They're doing a lot cooler stuff than I am when it comes to just, I don't know, everything going on when it comes to Nashville soccer. So follow them. I'm gonna go. Nashville is gonna get back to Gary Smith vibes and get 7 straight draws for 7 points to end the season. Even against Cincinnati, we're going to draw. It'll be a good time. Thank you so much for listening to the show. We really appreciate it, of course. We'll figure out if we have an episode next week. It is an international break. So that's always fun for us to try and figure out. So, yeah. Thank you guys so much for listening to the show. Appreciate it. And we hope you have a great rest of your week.